Haruka Shinozaki is an ugly loser having one-sided crush on most beautiful girl in his class. By some stroke of luck, he manages to get into a relationship with her only to find that her crush all time along was a creep with weird fetishes and now he must satisfy her in order to survive. While in class, Shinozaki daydreams about his class rep telling him she'll raise her undies for him. Turns out, the class rep is a girl named Akiho Kusaka who happens to be a straight-A student who is exceptionally good at sports. Shinozaki recalls how he had liked her for quite an extensive time frame but he had never had the guts to confess his feelings. Shinozaki finally musters the courage to confess his feelings to her and is surprised when Kusaka agrees to go out with him. Shinozaki is thrilled that Kusaka has agreed to go out with him, but he is stunned when she suddenly reveals that she plans on learning the 48 basic positions to ensure they'll have a good time. Shinozaki is left speechless as he realizes that Kusaka was talking about those positions and how she is not as innocent as she appeared. After classes, Shinozaki drops his books in his locker and prepares to go back home. However, a third-year student named Ariyama, who is his childhood friend and senior, throws herself against him and hugs him. She tells him that she'll give him the honor of walking home with her since he doesn't have a girlfriend. Shinozaki initially considers telling her that he's dating someone but decides against it, knowing fully well that she'll make a fuss. Shinozaki's younger sister arrives and also throws herself at him before announcing that she'll also be giving Shinozaki the honor of walking home with her since he doesn't have a girlfriend. Ariyama loudly proclaims that as Shinozaki's big sister, she will cook him a mouth-watering dish for dinner, and Shinozaki's younger sister excitedly tags along. The following day, Kusaka walks over to Shinozaki's seat and tells him that she would like to get to know him better. Shinozaki is excited by this as he believes that she feels the exact same way as he does until Kusaka asks what about his relationship fantasies. Later on, their homeroom teacher asks Kusaka to carry some books to the library, and Shinozaki offers to help her but Kusaka misinterprets his actions and asks if he's into masochist stuff. Shinozaki feels embarrassed as Kusaka proclaims this in front of the entire class, but he tries his hardest to convince her against it. Later, Kusaka is discussing with the other girls in class, but they imply that she always talks about inappropriate things. They complain about how hard it is to hang out with her or have a normal conversation. Kusaka leaves the class with a sad expression on her face, but runs into Shinozaki, who had been eavesdropping on her conversation with the other girls. He realizes that she's downcast and asks if she would like to hang out with him. Kusaka grabs his hand passionately and tells him that she would love to hang out with him. Kusaka and Shinozaki walk down the school halls together, but Shinozaki suddenly stops and reaches for Kusaka's hair, removing something from her ear. Stunned by the sudden contact, Kusaka draws away, but Shinozaki laughs at the fact that Kusaka has a weak point. Realizing he was pleased with his discovery, Kusaka offers to tell him her weakest point, but Shinozaki corners her to prevent her from saying something absurd. Shinozaki realizes their faces are pretty close and gets distracted by Kusaka's lips. However, Kusaka breaks the moment by telling him that her excitement came earlier due to their physical contact, and she'd like to request a do-over. Later, Kusaka notices that Shinozaki is visibly stressed and asks if she has anything to do with this. However, he explains that he's worried about the upcoming exams. Ariyama also appears beside Shinozaki, walks over to him, and inquires about his new lady friend. Shinozaki introduces Kusaka to Ariyama as his girlfriend, leaving Ariyama stunned. Throughout the day, Ariyama teases them with double-meaning remarks, and Shinozaki panics, hastily explaining to avoid misunderstandings. During recess, Kusaka sees Ariyama and Shinozaki in a compromising situation. Shinozaki attempts to free himself from Ariyama's grasp to explain to Kusaka, but Ariyama tightens her grip. Later, Ariyama tricks them into following her to a photo booth and convinces them to take a picture together. Kusaka realizes that Ariyama forced Shinozaki to tag along for an opportunity to get a picture with him. Displaying jealousy, Kusaka confronts their relationship. Before leaving, Ariyama advises Kusaka to deepen his relationship with Shinozaki, while cautioning Shinozaki not to misinterpret her intentions. Later on, Shinozaki receives a text from Kusaka, asking him to meet in the gym store. He imagines Kusaka lying on a mattress and asking him to join her flashes into his mind. Hoping Kusaka wouldn't pursue anything crazy, he's surprised to find her standing by a table filled with adult instruments. Kusaka asks him to electrocute her or indulge in his favorite fetishes, but Shinozaki realizes she's just trying to intensify their relationship. He firmly refuses to engage in any experiments. Afterward, Shinozaki and Kusaka head back together, but Kusaka wears a sad expression. To level up their relationship, she decides to jump in for a hug and end up in a compromising position with Shinazaki. Kusaka tells Shinazaki that she's only trying to make their relationship more intense so it can last longer. Still, he tells her that he understands she's always trying her best, and he truly appreciates her efforts. However, the only thing he wants is to be with her. Kusaka is touched by his words, and she finally climbs off him. They walk back home together, but right before they part, Kusaka calls Shinazaki by his first name. Shinazaki is so stunned by this that he pulls back, but Kusaka notices this and assumes that Shinazaki hates this. However, he assures her that this is not the case. He was deeply touched by how she called him by his first name. Later that night, Shinazaki's little sister Kanata, who seems to be the cat girl of this show, barges into his room and asks him for his undivided attention and affection. But when she sees that he's ignoring her because he's texting with someone named Kusaka, she forces him to reveal that Kusaka is actually his girlfriend. Unexpectedly, this greatly shocks Kanata, but she tries to play it cool and says that she's fine with it because nothing will ever get in the way of their sibling bond. However, upon leaving the room, she's unable to hide her true feelings. The next day at school, Kanata tries to sneak into her brother's classroom, but he catches her and lectures her in the hallway. Suddenly, Kusaka arrives and introduces herself to Kanata, but Kanata is immediately taken aback by how beautiful her brother's girlfriend is. Kanata then begins bragging about the deep and intimate relationship she shares with Shinazaki, which Kusaka obviously misinterprets, but Kanata doesn't correct her. Later on, Shinazaki and Kusaka have lunch together while the spying Kanata once again intrudes on them and explains that she wants to eat lunch with her brother, but in the process, she accidentally pushes Kusaka to the ground. As she falls, Kusaka apologizes to Shinazaki for being a bad girlfriend by accidentally preventing him from sneaking a peek under her skirt. Kanata then apologizes to Kusaka, which she immediately forgives, and the two become friends. Once back home, Kusaka watches TV, from which she gets the idea that a proper girlfriend should cook her boyfriend a special bento. So the next day at school, she brings Shinazaki a homemade bento, but decides not to give it to him because of a deadly demon king aura coming from it. She then puts her head between Ariyama's legs and starts to beg to teach her how to cook. On weekend, the three of them prepare a meal together at Ariyama's home, which turns out great despite the use of suggestive ingredients and Ariyama's continued teasing. But after their meal together, Ariyama continues to tease the two by telling them that she wants to eat Shinazaki's banana for dessert. Surprisingly, Shinazaki agrees to this and readies his banana, but despite her teasing, Ariyama looks away flustered while claiming that she's not mentally ready for this yet. But when Shinazaki reveals that he really is just holding a normal banana, Ariyama feels completely silly and refuses to let anyone know what she was truly thinking. After some days, Kusaka tells her father that her boyfriend is coming over. Her father is stunned by the fact that she has a boyfriend. After hearing this, Kusaka's mother sends her off to buy takeouts. As she leaves, Kusaka's mother tells her husband that she plans on entertaining Shinazaki. Her husband asks how she plans on entertaining him, but Kusaka's mother says nothing, which I can bet is going to be something sus. Shinazaki arrives a few minutes later, and Kusaka's mother opens the front door for him. Shinazaki incorrectly assumes that it's Kusaka because she bears a strong resemblance to her mother, but Kusaka's mother welcomes him and offers him some tea. While giving him tea, Kusaka's mother questions Shinazaki about his climax preferences and his age. She asks him how he would like to be entertained, but Shinazaki tells her that entertainment will not be necessary, and tries changing the conversation to something less awkward. Shinazaki notices a picture album by the table and asks Kusaka's mother if he can see it. He glances for Kusaka's childhood pictures. Kusaka's mother recalls how Kusaka had always been very flexible from a young age and how she had mastered the hardest positions from adult books at a young age. Meanwhile, Kusaka's father sneaks peeks at them as he recalls that Kusaka's ability to speak so openly about making love is because her mother had kept whispering lewd things in her ears from a young age. After they're done checking out the photo album, Kusaka's mother asks Shinazaki to help her out with chores. After they're done, Kusaka arrives, and her mother asks him to join them for lunch. Shinazaki tells her that he originally planned to eat with Kusaka but wouldn't mind eating with Kusaka's mother as well. Kusaka and her mother incorrectly assume that Shinazaki likes married women, but he tries to correct them. Shinazaki decides to speak with Kusaka's father, who seems less likely to spot absurd things, but Kusaka and her mother assume that Shinazaki is also interested in men. Kusaka decides to rescue Shinazaki from the clutches of her father by taking him for a walk. After Kusaka returns, she tells her mother that Shinazaki had asked her out for their first date. Her mother advises her to go all the way with him, but her father tells her that she's way too young for that. Kusaka's mother suggests she carry out some research on what other young people are doing on their first dates these days. Kusaka spends the rest of the day doing research. The following day, Shinazaki arrives at Kusaka's home, and she opens the front door for him. Kusaka tilts her head to the side, and Shinazaki is stunned by how cute she is. Kusaka notices that Shinazaki is at a loss for words and asks if he noticed something. Shinazaki tells her that he thinks her clothes are nice. Kusaka then mentions she did some research and wanted to gauge the effectiveness of the 30-degree tilt before committing to it. Shinazaki sighs in frustration as Kusaka's words ruin the innocence of the moment. They then visit the movie cinema to watch a love movie. Shinazaki thinks about how choosing a romance movie was the best idea since it would only depict love, and there wouldn't be any explicit action on the screen. However, he almost loses his marbles when the main characters start engaging in climax moments. Shinazaki is surprised that even romance movies have exciting scenes these days, but Kusaka looks at him smugly. Shinazaki and Kusaka spend the rest of the day doing fun things, and their date finally comes to an end. Before they part ways, Shinazaki apologizes, mentioning that they hadn't done anything intense because he was so engrossed in the moment. He reassures her that he's content just spending time with her. However, Kusaka takes it the wrong way and walks off with a sad expression on her face. To cheer her up, Shinazaki decides to ask her out on another date to the park that weekend, where they could enjoy watching the cherry blossoms. Kusaka brightens up at this and tells Shinazaki that she will do her best to be a better girlfriend. The following day, Kusaka falls sick at school, and Shinazaki takes her to the school clinic. However, the school nurse turns out to be a creep woman who tells them she'll leave them to get down to business. Despite Shinazaki's attempts to correct her, the nurse insists on staying and even winks at him for a special effect. Noticing Shinazaki's discomfort, the nurse sneaks out of the room while Shinazaki wonders why everyone in his school has such a lewd mindset. After the nurse leaves, Shinazaki calls Kusaka's mother to inform her of her daughter's condition. He gives Kusaka a drink, hoping she'll get better, but she spills the drink on herself while drinking it. Kusaka assumes that Shinazaki enjoys water spots and implies arousal, leaving him stunned. Her mother walks in at that moment, making the same assumption. Shinazaki curses the Kusaka family genes and tries to correct them. Kusaka's mother decides to take her home, expressing hopes that she'll get better in time for her date with Shinazaki. The following Sunday, Kusaka calls Shinazaki and informs him that she is fully recovered. They walk to the park for a picnic, only to discover that all the blossoms have fallen due to the heavy rain the previous night. Kusaka freaks out, worrying that she has failed Shinazaki as a girlfriend. However, Shinazaki tries to calm her fears by expressing that he's content just spending time with her. Kusaka finally cheers up when Shinazaki suggests they could always watch the blossoms the following year. She stares at him with passion and asks him to promise that they'll still be together the following year. The next day at school, a new transfer student named Rina Seijo joins Shinazaki in Kusaka's class, where she reveals that she got transferred from an elite all-girls school to a mixed-gender one so she can learn about romance with a man. Seeing how close Shinazaki and Kusaka are, Rina decides to approach them and admits to them that she wants to make friends but doesn't know how to deepen friendships, especially with boys. Throughout the rest of the day as they try to help Rina out, her phrasing and weird mannerisms cause several misunderstandings that end up being too much for Shinazaki to handle. Later that day, Shinazaki introduces Rina to Ariyama, who immediately feels insecure after seeing how massive Rina's talents are from hers. Unfortunately for Shinazaki, he unwillingly ends up in the middle of this. At the end of the day, Rina bids goodbye to her new friends by giving them both a kiss on the cheek, which greatly embarrasses them and makes Kusaka slightly jealous. The next day, Rina invites the couple and Ariyama to the zoo, which Kusaka's parents coincidentally also decide to visit. While out on their date, Shinazaki finds himself confronted with all sorts of illusions while observing the wildlife, and his day is once again filled with all kinds of shit. But when the sun starts to set and the gang gets ready to head home, Ariyama takes Rina away with her to give the couple some space. But just as they're about to hold hands, Kusaka's parents arrive out of nowhere accidentally. The following week, Rina announces that she has just gotten a new phone, and Kusaka takes pictures of her with Shinazaki. Rina thanks Shinazaki for giving her first memory with a gentleman before announcing to the entire school that she had just taken some intimate pictures with Shinazaki. However, Shinazaki chases after her and demands that Rina should tell everyone that it's facial pics. Later on, Shinazaki takes a walk with Kusaka, and she tells him that she recently found out that holding the chin makes the heart pound. Shinazaki blushes as he realizes what comes next. Afterward, Kusaka implies that they try creating that moment, but she stares at him with an intimidating expression, causing Shinazaki to lose his guts. Kusaka also tells Shinazaki how she discovered that the ultimate girlfriend can easily predict her boyfriend's thoughts without him expressing his feelings. Kusaka expresses her desire to increase her ultimate girlfriend power and asks him to refrain from talking to her. She ends up correctly predicting his thoughts on many occasions. However, Shinazaki faces public stigma because Kusaka keeps doing selfless things for him. Rina Ariyama learns about this and tries to increase her bond with Shinazaki by predicting what he feels like eating. Shinazaki realizes they're probably planning on saying something inappropriate, so he screams out that's not what he's thinking about. Ariyama correctly predicts that Shinazaki would like to eat his favorite food and offers to cook it for him. Shinazaki realizes he was wrong and tries convincing Ariyama to cook it for him. Later on, the student council holds a meeting, and their leader, an outspoken and principled young lady named Igarashi, asks them to make suggestions on what they think the other students need. Shizumori, a girl who enjoys watching couples during their climax moments, suggests that girls and boys be allowed to share the same locker rooms. Igarashi obviously refuses and asks for another suggestion, but Kusaka proposes allowing students to carry exciting books in the class halls. Initially refusing, Igarashi is blackmailed by Kusaka, reminding her of overhearing her tongue training. Despite teasing from council members, Igarashi gives in to Kusaka's wishes due to emotional pressure. Later, Kusaka develops hiccups, and Shinazaki tries everything to calm them. He attempts to make her sneeze, leading them to the practical lab in search of paper strings. Ariyama, intending to scare them, is surprised when she hears strange moans. Springing out after hearing Shinazaki's comment about inserting slowly, she discovers Shinazaki inserting paper strings into Kusaka's mouth, mistakenly thinking he has a weird paper fetish. Shinazaki explains he was just trying to help calm Kusaka's hiccups. In another scene, Rina visits a convenience store to get chocolates but is surprised to see a chocolatey Common Delight on the same shelf. Unsure, she considers asking the store attendant but decides against it, thinking it would be weird. Despite being more expensive, she assumes it's a Heavenly Delight and purchases it in bulk, unaware that it's a rubber balloon. The store attendant is stunned by Rina's boldness as she plans to share it with the class, thinking it's a unique treat. Later on, Shinazaki picks up Kusaka from her house on their way back to school, and notices a guy named Seiya, who is pretty popular among the ladies. Shinazaki stares at him in jealousy while harboring hopes that Kusaka would not go crazy over him like the other girls. Later on, Shinazaki visits the restroom and walks out to see Kusaka and Seiya having a conversation. Shinazaki sees Ariyama around the corner and asks how far she is willing to go with him. Ariyama is in fear while Shinazaki stares at her. Upon finding Seiya in a close moment with Kusaka, Shinazaki hugs Ariyama tightly while trying to convince himself that hugs happen all the time between friends. Rina walks over to them to ask what happened. Shinazaki explains everything to her. Seiya rips open his shirt at that moment, and Shinazaki declares that he'll confront him. He walks over to Seiya and Kusaka with an intimidating look, and Rina comments about how she has never seen Shinazaki with a more hideous expression. Shinazaki panics at the last minute and asks Seiya if he's friends with Kusaka. Rina and Ariyama are stunned by how Shinazaki loses his marbles, but Seiya doesn't take this harshly. He tells Shinazaki of how his popularity among the females had made him lack male friends. He tells him that he wants to have more male friends and he was hoping that Shinazaki could be friends with him, which is why he had decided to meet up with Kusaka since she's his girlfriend and knows a lot about him. During the Bamboo Festival, people hang their wishes on the ropes, and Shinazaki peeks at their wishes. He makes fun of Ariyama for her wish to start wearing a B-cup at the very least, but Ariyama is embarrassed about this and asks Shinazaki to stop staring at other people's wishes. Later on, Kusaka asks if Shinazaki wants to know what she wished for, but Shinazaki thinks it's something creepy and tells her no, despite being curious about it. Kusaka is hurt by this as it turns out that she had wished to hang wishes with him during the next Bamboo Festival. Shinazaki calls after her and tries to apologize to her, but Kusaka walks off. Later on, Shinazaki and Kusaka do warm-ups in preparation for their upcoming sports event. Shinazaki stares at Kusaka's talents as she bounces up and down. She notices him doing this and walks over to him, staring at her, and asks if she could do a favor for him as his girlfriend. Kusaka raises her shirt, and Shinazaki incorrectly assumes that she's trying to undress before him. It turns out that Kusaka is only placing a placard with his name on it on her chest. Shinazaki sighs in relief, but the gym instructor breaks their moment by asking Shinazaki to carry some supplies to the gym store. Seiya offers to follow Shinazaki, but Kusaka sneaks after them in worry as she notices Seiya's apparent interest in Shinazaki. After Shinazaki and Seiya drop the supplies, Shinazaki asks Seiya to teach him how to play baseball secretly so that he can impress Kusaka the following day. Seiya stylishly teaches him how to handle a bat during their private practice. As they engage in male-to-male interaction, Kusaka walks in on them and incorrectly assumes that they're up to something. However, Shinazaki keeps it a secret from her because he doesn't want Kusaka to know that he's bad at baseball. Later on, Shinazaki joins the rest of their classmates, and Kusaka, worried and thinking he's busy learning the 48 positions with Seiya, runs off to the field to search for him. She sees him with Kanata, Rina, and Ariyama. She sighs, expressing relief to see that he's in safe hands, but Shinazaki tries convincing her that the reverse is the case. The start of the baseball game is announced, and Shinazaki rushes onto the baseball court. Unfortunately, he plays horribly, and the only strike he manages to make ends up hitting Seiya right where the sun doesn't shine. Shinazaki panics and kneels right in front of Seiya. Kusaka almost passes out at this. At the end of the game, Shinazaki apologizes to Kusaka for being such a bad player. He also reveals that he had taken secret lessons to improve his playing skills, but they hadn't helped. Kusaka is touched that he put in this much effort to impress her and gives some double hints that she had thought something else was going on. Later on, Kusaka and Shinazaki take a walk down the park together and they discover a lost dog. Together, they feed it some food, and it shows them some neat tricks. Kusaka asks the dog to beg, but it suddenly races under her skirt and licks her. Shinazaki is surprised by this and tries correcting the dog by asking it to beg properly, but he stares at Shinazaki's ground in disgust. Shinazaki wonders what kind of weird owner the dog has, and of course, it's revealed to be Rina's dog. Later on, the student council announces that Shinazaki's class will be going on a 2-day, 1-night camping trip. Igarashi suggests that they all take a test of courage and offers to help the other council members plan out activities for their classes, but the other members refuse. Unfortunately, they're unable to come up with anything worthwhile, so they end up going back to Igarashi to bribe her and ask for help. The first day of the camping trip finally arrives, and the class takes off. After they arrive, the boys and girls are asked to cook. Shinazaki accidentally injures his hand while chopping vegetables. Seiya suggests sucking the blood to help, and Kusaka, noticing the situation, rushes over quickly to join in. Seiya is in pain that Kusaka ruined his moment, but he continues cooking. However, the animals in the forest are so drawn to these irresistible charms that they come around to get a taste of his cooking. Seiya announces that he has brought a special mushroom for them, and Shinazaki is excited by this as it's one of his favorite delicacies, but Kusaka forbids him from heading over to meet him. Later on, Igarashi announces that it's time for the test of courage, and a sea of volunteers appear to be the leader of the scaring committee. The scaring committee walks off to hide in the forest, and Kusaka grabs Shinazaki's hand, fully aware that Seiya has an ulterior motive. Shinazaki incorrectly assumes that Seiya is scared of the forest and smiles, realizing it's allowing him to be closer to her as they walk through the forest. Shizumori creeps up on them, interrupting their moment. Shizumori asks if they can carry on with what they were about to do, and Shinazaki questions if she followed them to scare them. Meanwhile, Rina is chased by the first scary group, taking to her heels and running around the forest. Rina runs into Kusaka and Shinazaki, calming down a bit before joining them on their walk through the forest. They walk for a bit, but a half-naked figure suddenly starts squinting through the forest, terrifying Rina. Shinazaki tries to protect Kusaka, but Kusaka takes a fighting stance, realizing it's probably Seiya trying to get closer to Shinazaki. Kusaka and others desperately try to avoid Seiya, who keeps sweeping through the forest. However, Seiya's ropes get loose, and his rear rams right into Shinazaki's face. His unmentionables are next as they collide with Rina, and the four fall into a mess. Igarashi springs out at that moment, hoping to catch some annoying students doing something naughty, but she's unprepared for what she sees. Igarashi cries out in horror while Shizumori comforts her. After she calms down, she asks Shizumori if she can sleep beside her that night. Shizumori's mind dives deep into the gutters as she assumes that Igarashi is asking her to sleep with her, but she clarifies that she prefers watching other people doing things. However, Igarashi stares at her in confusion. Shizumori realizes that Igarashi is about to have another panic attack, so she agrees to allow her to sleep beside her. Later that night, the girls take a shower before bed. Shizumori asks Kusaka if she's ever been with a guy. Kusaka reveals that she's inexperienced. Shizumori asks Igarashi just how far she thinks a couple should go during high school trips. Igarashi blushes furiously before telling her that they could join hands. However, Shizumori smiles creepily and tells Kusaka that a couple of other things could certainly be joined since they were both teenagers with raging hormones. Before Kusaka goes to bed, she recalls everything that Shizumori has told her and wonders if Shinazaki and she would take things further that night, especially since it is the only night of their camping and the one night that they could be alone without the supervision of adults. Surprisingly, Shinazaki's head pops in through her camping tent at that moment and Kusaka jolts back in surprise. Kusaka tells Shinazaki that she has finally realized just how serious he is about their relationship. But Shinazaki thinks lightly of this and asks Kusaka to take a walk into the woods with him. Meanwhile, Kusaka's mind is haunted by the fear of the inevitable as she is still mentally unprepared to go all the way with Shinazaki. Shinazaki suddenly draws to a halt and turns to face Kusaka before revealing that there's something he's been wanting to do with her during this trip. Kusaka turns away and braces herself for the unknown, but she's surprised when he reaches for her hand and tells her that he would like to create a special moment with her while watching the stars from a breathtaking scenery. Kusaka's eyes tear up with emotions as she apologizes for being such an inexperienced girlfriend. After they arrive at school, Igarashi pledges to uncover all forms of indecency among students. She notices a couple stepping out of a vacant classroom and decides to inspect the room for traces of impure behavior, but she runs into Shizumori. She reveals that the couple had been carrying out some educational activities. They suddenly hear footsteps approaching and Shizumori drags Igarashi into a closet with the hidden intention of spying on the new couple. However, she lies to Igarashi that they're lying in wait so they can apprehend the unsuspecting couple. Shinazaki and Kanata, his younger sister, walk into the classroom at that moment. Shinazaki educates Kanata on how she shouldn't let milk spill so carelessly. Shinazaki accidentally spills some milk in a weird way, and Shizumori and Igarashi assume that Shinazaki is asking his sister to go down on him. Igarashi is shocked by this and tries to burst out of the closet to stop him, but Shizumori holds her back while trying to see more of this insane stuff through the peephole. Their struggle leads to them falling out of the closet in a compromising position, and Igarashi accuses Shinazaki of committing an unforgivable act. She asks him to follow her to the student council room and requests that he tender a letter of apology before the entire school. Shinazaki tries to correct Igarashi, but she doesn't listen to him. Igarashi walks off into the distance, but Shinazaki notices that her skirt is raised and tries to tell her inconspicuously. Shinazaki asks Igarashi if she sometimes feels like touching someone rear, but Igarashi's resolve to punish him is strengthened as she leads him toward the student council room. They run into Kusaka, who realizes that Igarashi's skirt is raised, but she says nothing about this and simply tells Igarashi that it's hot. Igarashi explains everything that she thought had occurred to Kusaka, but Kusaka's mind is glued to Igarashi's panties and she fails to comprehend what Igarashi tells her. Igarashi turns toward Kusaka and suddenly realizes that the student body has been staring at her panties. She wonders why no one had told her, and she suddenly realizes that Shinazaki had been trying to tell her casually. Igarashi apologizes to Shinazaki, and Shinazaki tells her that he'll forgive her if she promises to let him go without asking him to write a public apology. Eventually, she lets him go on a light permit. Later on, Shinazaki asks Kusaka out on another date, but she tells him she can't make it because her father injured his back during an intense session with her mother. Shinazaki worries about what to do over the weekend, but Ariyama appear as if by magic and invite him to go shopping with her. Shinazaki and Ariyama visit the cinema together, but while getting tickets, the attendant implies that they're a couple. Ariyama and Shinazaki are both embarrassed by this, and Shinazaki blames Ariyama for it, as she was always clinging to him. After they leave the cinema, Ariyama asks Shinazaki if he would like to come over. She gives him a flirty look, saying her parents are out, and offers to make him some food, hinting at more intimate possibilities. However, Shinazaki tells her he's aware that she's inviting him because she's scared of being alone. After they arrive at Ariyama's house, she tells Shinazaki that she wants to change into casual clothing and leaves for her room. However, Ariyama mistakenly handcuffs herself, losing the key. Falling on the floor while trying to move, she calls out to Shinazaki for help. He's forced to escort Ariyama to the restroom, ends up cooking for her, and even brushes her teeth. After dinner, Ariyama instructs Shinazaki to stay by her side, and they recall childhood memories. Feeling sleepy, Ariyama expresses a desire to shower before sleeping. Shinazaki teases that she's asking him to bathe with her, but Ariyama jokes and clarifies she doesn't plan on going that far. After her shower, Shinazaki assists her to bed, noticing a bump in her pocket. Realizing it's the key, he attempts to remove it while Ariyama moans loudly. After unlocking the handcuffs, Ariyama convinces Shinazaki to sleep over because it's already late. The following day, Shinazaki's class has a cooking practical, and Kusaka promises to cook the most mouth-watering lunch for Shinazaki. During the cooking class, Kusaka skillfully dices the vegetables, and Shinazaki stares at her in awe. Seiya appears out of nowhere, and Shinazaki expresses how touched he is by the effort Kusaka is putting in to make him happy. Overwhelmed by emotions, Shinazaki fails to realize that he has been handling his knife improperly. Seiya gets behind Shinazaki and tries showing him how to handle a knife, but he manages to make it look weird. Kusaka turns to look at Shinazaki, but she realizes that Seiya is guiding him in an improper way, and keeps staring at them without realizing that the food on the fire is already burning. Shinazaki tries to run to her to save her from a fire accident, but Seiya takes advantage and holds him in place, ramming his rear into him. After Kusaka realizes what happened, she gathers the food and tastes it. She loudly proclaims that it's delicious because it was made out of passion. However, her classmates refuse to taste it, but Rina decides to taste it due to their strong bond as friends. She almost dies from food poisoning and tries to hide it. Kusaka discovers this and mopes around, expressing sadness that she couldn't prepare a mouth-watering dish for Shinazaki. However, Shinazaki tells her that he would gladly eat the garbage of the food. Kusaka tries discouraging him, fearing that he might also become a victim of food poisoning. But Shinazaki tells her that he hopes he falls sick because he would like to be nursed by her. Kusaka stares at Shinazaki passionately as she is touched by Shinazaki's resolve. The next day at school, the classes have already ended, and all the students have left, except for Shinazaki, who is still sleeping in class. Kusaka then appears and tries to pat his head. However, when he wakes up, she instinctively pretends to be asleep, and Shinazaki is the one who ends up patting Kusaka's head instead. This causes her to wake up and run away in embarrassment. The following day, Shinazaki and his classmates are asked to sketch the forest scenery or the people within it. Shinazaki tries sketching Rina, but the wind keeps blowing her skirt up. He decides to ask Ariyama if he can sketch her, but Ariyama is shocked by this and horrifically asks if he's so pathetic that he would ask for that much from a friend. Later on, Shinazaki walks around the forest grounds of Kusaka and tells her how he couldn't draw the scenery because it was way too plain, and he couldn't find a model who could stay in the same position for long. However, Kusaka offers to be his model and starts posing for him, while Shinazaki begins to draw her. The sun highlights Shinazaki's features, and he is suddenly struck by how beautiful she is. He regains all these fond memories of her and realizes that he loves her for who she is. Shinazaki tells Kusaka that he loves her, but she is stunned by this revelation and doesn't respond. Shinazaki stutters and tries to take back his words, but the shock of the moment finally fades, and Kusaka tells him that she loves him too. They move closer, like they share a strong connection, and look deeply into each other's eyes. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon for more plot-filled anime recaps.